I want to thank everyone for hopping on today. October Cybersecurity Month, so we've been trying to do webinars about cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, and we have a great presenter today. This webinar is recorded. We highly encourage you to ask questions. Really, that's what this webinar is about. I was lucky enough to hear our presenter, Doan Winkel from John Carroll University, speak at another function. He is awesome. He provides resources that are truly valuable to small businesses that you can actually use. So I really hope you enjoyed today's presentation. And again, please ask questions because he is a wealth of knowledge. So Doan, I'm going to pass that on to you.
Good deal. Hey, everybody. Thanks, Pam, for inviting me. So when I do these kind of things, I try to make it very practical, just so you can learn some things and hopefully take some things away that you can use this afternoon. So I'm just going to go talk a little bit about some AI stuff at maybe a little bit of a higher level, but then show you some tools that I found useful, and then show you how to use some other things. And so maybe it's review for some of you, and that's a good thing. Maybe it's brand new for some of you, and that's also a good thing. But as Pam said, ask questions in the chat, and then there'll be plenty of time afterwards to cover things that might come up for people. But so at a high level, when I talk to a lot of business people about AI stuff, I come at it with experience from a couple different angles. So I teach entrepreneurship at John Carroll University. I lead the entrepreneurship program here, so I have a staff, amazing staff that works with me there. And then I'm also a founder in an ed tech company. And so in all those roles, I try to use AI stuff as much as possible. Been using it for quite a while in the ed tech company in particular, before it all sort of blew up a couple years ago. But certainly since it all kind of blew up with ChatGPT and everything a couple years ago, I've been playing around with this stuff for hours every day, just trying to figure out how I can be more efficient in what I do so that I can be more effective in what I do. And that, I think, to me, is really the value in a lot of these things. And so one of the big questions I get asked, and one of the things I always like to say, is that AI, these tools, this technology, whatever, it's not going to replace you. So I think it still is almost pervasive out there, this fear of it's going to replace me. And what I tell people is it's not really going to replace you, but what's going to happen is people who are really good with it, who understand it and are able to use it and learn about it, those people are going to replace you if you don't do the same. And so I think it's not, this thing that's going to save business, and it maybe isn't all the hype around it maybe isn't 100% accurate, but it is useful. It is also dangerous. But if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't learn about things you can do with it and familiarize yourself with these kind of tools, somebody who knows them is going to replace you because they're going to be more efficient and they're going to be more effective. And that's just going to happen, right? So part of the way I encourage people to think about using this stuff, if we kind of start from zero, because it really is overwhelming. The number of tools that are out there, the things that they can do, all the information being tossed out on whatever platform you use to get your information, it's really overwhelming. And so part of what I suggest people do is you kind of sit down and you make two lists, and you make a list of low value tasks that you do, and you make a list of high value tasks that you do. In your judgment, what is low value and what is high value. And the vast majority of the tasks that are low value on your list, you can offload a considerable amount of that work onto some kind of AI tool. And so that's kind of the place I say, start there, make those lists. If you have a boss, if you're not the boss, compare notes with your boss, and see what the two of you together think. These are kind of some low value things I do. I have to do them, but they don't necessarily create a lot of value for the business. And then think about how can we offload some of those onto these tools, and just pick one, right? Pick one, start Googling around, start asking colleagues, for email responding or whatever the task might be, what's a good tool to use for this? And you'll see that, pretty soon you'll find some patterns that a lot of people are talking about, this one or this one or this one. And then if you just spend 20 to 30 minutes a day playing around with one, you'll very quickly learn how to use it and learn how to be pretty effective with it. And so instead of being overwhelmed, really narrow down, pick one task that's low value, find a tool that does that task, and practice using that tool for 20, 30 minutes a day, right? And very quickly you'll get up to speed on it. And the cool thing is with a lot of these tools or programs, or whatever you want to call them, the logic behind using them is fairly similar, right? So once you really get comfortable using one, it's not that difficult to bounce over and start using another one. So, you know, do that, right? You get going with one task, now you're good. Now you can start on another task and you can learn how to use a tool to help with that task and keep going and keep going. And what I found both in my teaching role and in leading a team and being part of a company is most of the stuff I don't really want to do, I don't have to do most of that anymore. I still need to be involved in the process. I can't like remove myself from the process entirely because I have to use my brain to verify what's going on, information it's using, all that kind of stuff. But it takes much of that work off of my plate so that I can do things that are much more valuable. As a teacher, I can spend a lot more time with my students. As a team leader, I can spend a lot more time supporting my team. As part of a company, I can spend a lot more time building the customer funnel, right? So those kind of have a high value thing. So just in terms of kind of situating yourself with this stuff, that's what I would suggest. And when well, let me go through this first. So I just want to show you a couple tools that have been really, really useful for me in all these roles that let's see, here we go. In all these roles, that I've been a part of. So there's three of them, and then I'm going to spend a lot of my time on ChatGPT, right? So you may or may not use that one. You may use Copilot or Gemini or whatever. You may not use any of them. And so regardless, hopefully I can show you some things in that tool today that are really useful to you. Hopefully I can show you some ways to use it that might flatten the learning curve, so to speak, and make them a little more valuable for you. But first off, there's three tools that I think any business should or any person working in any business should look into. And so I just wanted to throw these three out at you. One is Magical, and so one way to think about this maybe is like Zapier on steroids, and so it is a way to connect tools, right? To connect, email and Google Drive and LinkedIn and whatever, so that you can automate a lot of stuff, right? And so you have these kind of AI agents that autofill information, forms, databases, messages. There's the one that I use it most for is there's a text expander. And so essentially it's these little snippets, right? So if you're sending the same emails all the time, if you're using the same language to respond to customer service requests or sales funnel type communication, part of what this allows you to do is use these little short codes. So you're just typing in a couple characters and it fills in the rest of whatever you need, right? And so whether you're using this for communication purposes, you're using this for connecting different tools that you use in your business, this is really a good one. It's fairly simple. It's not that expensive. And so again, this is one where, if IT or whomever in your business is cool with you playing around with this, just dive in there, play around with it for a week, right? Try one or two different things that you could use help to automate, messaging, filling in information, connecting these two, programs together. When somebody comes into the funnel here, these messages go out, whatever. Maybe you don't have a huge CRM package, and this might be able to be a stand-in, if you're a smaller business. So Magical is one that I found to be really useful in terms of just automating a lot of tasks, and particularly when it comes to messaging. That's how I mostly use it, is those sort of short code text expanders for emails and replying to emails, building out sort of customer sales funnels and that kind of thing. The other one's Fireflies. And again, with any of these things, there's tons and tons of varieties of these programs out there. I think I read something a while back that there was like 30 some AI programs or tools released every day. So there's just an obscene amount of things out there. These are just three that I've heard good things about from people for certain tasks, and so I've tried them out. I played with them. I use them. I find them to be satisfactory for what I need to do. So that's just why I'm sharing them with you. But Fireflies is one for meeting notes, whether it's Zoom meetings or meeting Google meetings or in-person meetings. It records it all. It gives you transcriptions. It analyzes it. It gives people tasks based on what was discussed in the meeting. So it really just kind of automates that whole transcribing of meetings, gathering information, and disseminating next step information. So it just kind of takes care of all of that. And so my team here, the business I'm involved with, like we use these kind of things just to speed up that whole process because none of us like to do it, right? And so now none of us need to. And like I said, I like this one particularly because it works whether you're online or in-person meeting. So kind of goes both ways. Other ones I started to play around with either only worked, in Zoom or online or only worked in person, but this one kind of goes both ways, and it captures all that data. And so this is a good one. If you're doing notes, if you're having meetings and you're struggling to keep accurate notes and keep accurate to do and next steps and stuff, use that. And then the last one is Reclaim. This is scheduling, right? And so for me, I'm not really good with details. I tell my students details and I are kind of worst enemies, or frenemies, I guess. I know they need to happen, but I just am terrible with them. So I use this to help with scheduling, meetings and conversations, all that kind of stuff. So it just is really, really seamless. It's this one's particularly for Google calendars. We have Google system here at John Carroll, and so but there are similar ones for Microsoft or other platforms if you're not a Google person. But what it does is it analyzes calendars. It makes it very, very easy to find meetings, and if meetings need to be adjusted, it makes it very couple clicks, and it analyzes other people's schedules and suggests new meeting times. So it eliminates all of this back and forth and emails and texts and phone calls and let me stop by your office and all that nonsense. And it just makes scheduling meetings and coordinating things like that literally a snap, right? So 3 that I say are really useful for any number of use cases and are very simple to understand and to get onboarded to use are Magical, Fireflies, and Reclaim, right? So those are 3 you can use. So, okay, so now what I want to do, I want to show you and talk a little bit about ChatGPT. So these chatbots, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, there's lots of them out there. Some of them are better at some things versus others. It's always a game of the next release, right? And the next one comes up with the next release and it maybe is a little better now than the other one. So I don't really play around with that game. I just kind of started with ChatGPT, and for what I need to do with these, it does it. And so I just really play with this one. I mess around a little bit with Claude, but I haven't really ever played around with Google's Gemini or Microsoft's Copilot, just because this one does what I need it to do. So this is the one I'm most familiar with. I think it has the most capability, and so I stick with it. So I just want to show you some sort of tips, tricks, that kind of thing with ChatGPT. A lot of this is transferable over to the other ones. The interface might look a little different, and the ways to do these things might look a little different, but the logic behind it and the process behind it and all that kind of thing is the same. So hopefully this is valuable no matter which one of these you use. And if you don't use these, I would encourage you, similarly to what I said before, just hop on here, 10, 15 minutes a day, make it just super short, try some things out, using these things as a skill. So just like any skill, if you wanted to pick up a saxophone or you wanted to go figure out how to play racquetball, like you're going to be terrible at it at first because it's a skill. Same thing here, right? When you first do it, you're not going to be great at it, which means the information you get back is not going to be the greatest, but understand that that's not the tool's problem, that's your problem. Because the better questions you ask and the better you get at engaging with these things in a conversation, the better the output and the feedback you're going to get is, right? So just stick to it, stick with it, and you'll see it becomes a very, very powerful thing. So one of the main things with these platforms or tools is privacy. And so within ChatGPT, if you go into your settings here and the data controls piece right here, there's this little thing here that says improve the model for everyone. I'm not a tech person. I've talked to some tech people. I've talked to people who used to work for OpenAI who makes this particular one, and they've told me, so trust the telephone game, word of mouth, right? But they've told me that basically if I turn this off, right, what that means is that the information that I'm putting into ChatGPT is not becoming part of the training data. So it's not sort of shared, right? Of course, the default when you sign on here is that this is going to be on because they want the data you create and using it to be able to improve it, right? But I just turn it off just to be safe. So just one little thing, right? You can make your own choices, but understand that if this is on, anything that you do in here becomes part of the training data that they use. So any information you put in here becomes public in that sense. So you just got to be kind of careful and aware of that. And then the other thing with these tools is they're essentially trained on words and writing that is out there on the internet, right? Or that people are scanning. And so they tend to be very, very biased because there are certain cultures that don't have a lot of written word stuff or that aren't really well represented in information on the internet, right? And so just understand that these things can be very, very biased in the information they have been trained on and the information they're giving you. So again, just kind of understanding that as you go into it. So what used to be the key skill in using these things was prompt engineering, they called it, right? How do you write a good prompt so that you get good information back? And what's really cool is you don't need to know that skill anymore. So give you an example, right? Let's say I want to develop a full-blown marketing plan for social media strategies for a small business in Cleveland, Ohio that sells innovative self-cleaning razor blades, right? So I'd say that's what I'm trying to do. So if I just take that prompt, right, and I give it to ChatGPT in this case, it's going to give me some information, right? So it's going to give me, here's some objectives and goals and target audience, social media platforms, here's ones I could use, some content strategy, posting schedules, engagement, community, so it gives me information. Like this is a lot of information it's giving me. As with anything, before I act on any information, it is my responsibility to review that information, right? And so I deal with this a lot with students, right? Don't just copy and paste things. Don't just take what information you're getting here as fact. You have to still use your brain and see what it's giving you, but it really speeds up the whole process, right? So anyway, if I just gave it that kind of basic, it's kind of a garbage prompt because it's not really giving it a lot of context, it's not giving it a lot of information, it still gives me it gives me a lot of information, right? It's telling me here's a posting schedule, right? Post on Instagram and Facebook 4 times a week. So it gives me some information. It gives me kind of a level of depth and detail, okay? But if I go in here and I use this prompt maker custom GPT, right? And the way we get to these is, and this is available for anybody, free plan, paid plan, anything at all. So if you go into this Explore GPTs tab, it's essentially like the Apple Store, is one way to think of it, right? So people build these custom bots, let's just call them, right? That are built to do one very specific thing, okay? And so if you go in here and you look for one called Prompt Maker, it's this orange one here by Ruben created it, okay? If you go in here and you click on these and you start a chat with it, let's see, what happens is it comes up, and the way you want to use this is, let me get back here. The way you want to use it is when it pops up, you tell it, please optimize this prompt, right? And then you type in your basic prompt, which, no offense, for most of us, they're not that great. I always tell my students, garbage in, garbage out, right? So this prompt is a bad prompt. What happens is Ruben has built this thing where it turns bad prompts into really good prompts because there's a certain structure that works well with ChatGPT, and he, understands that structure, and he's built this bot to turn bad into good. And so what happens is in a matter of seconds, I now have this prompt, right? And so just you can see by the level of detail and the robustness that it's much better. and it's giving much more specific instructions. Do a market and audience analysis, do platform selection and give me rationale, build a content strategy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So this right here is way better than this. And so if I use the better prompt, I'm going to get better information out, right? And like I said, this used to be the skill and how do we write this? But you don't need to have that skill anymore, because something like this custom GPT, which everybody has access to, will then create good prompts for you. And what happens is, as you're reviewing this to make sure it's actually going to give you what you want, you're actually giving it the right instructions. As you're reviewing this, you start to understand and start to learn the structure that it likes, right? And so eventually you can kind of transition over. It just happens naturally where you can just type prompts if you want, because now you understand the structure because you've been learning it by engaging with this, okay? So anyway, if I then just take, I didn't review it for the purposes of this call, right? But let's say I reviewed it and I thought, okay, this is good, and I made whatever tweaks I want to it, and I put this prompt in there. It's giving me a lot more information, right? It's giving me a lot better detail on content strategy, on the specific types of content, right? It's giving me a lot better information on kind of ad strategies and budget allocation, right? How to allocate budgets, not just the previous one, I think, just said spend $500 a month, right? Or something generic like that. This gets into a little greater detail, right? But you can see it keeps kind of going, and it's just a much better output, okay? Now, as with any technology or any tool, there's free versions and there's paid versions, and the paid versions give you bells and whistles the free versions don't have. This is the same with ChatGPT. And so I do the paid version because it's $20 a month, and to me that's absolutely worth it for what it does. I believe that this newest release, ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas, is only available in the paid version. And here's why this is really cool, because before this, what would happen is I would get some feedback, I would get some output. Let's just say, I would get this output, right? And if I wanted to learn more about a specific piece, or if I was like, oh, I didn't mean that, I meant this, I would have to now continue the conversation here, give it another prompt, say, oh, I didn't mean X, I meant Y, right? Or tell me more about, housing stability over time. Tell me more about that issue. I would have to have that conversation, and it would become this really, really, really long list of information, and sometimes hard for me to kind of go back and keep track of what did I do and where did this come from and all that. So it could be kind of overwhelming, okay? But now what happened is with this Canvas release, it gives you this output, right? And now what I can do is I can interact with the output exactly where I need to. And so let's say I can just highlight and I can say, this is a little confusing to me. Please give me more information on how specifically I can build brand recognition for this product, right? And so I can interact exactly where I need more information, and it inserts that exactly where I'm trying to learn more, right? So instead of having this huge long string where I got to go back and try and piece things together, this just puts it all in one place and keeps it all together where it needs to be, right? And so I can just go on and have this conversation as long as I want. If I need more information here, I just keep going, right? Anytime I highlight things, I can just ask ChatGPT and it will respond only where I've highlighted things, okay? So I can do that every single step of the way. I can, why do you think I should only allocate 60%? I was going to do 80% or whatever, and it'll give me more information for that, right? And so part of what I recommend is, if you're, for instance, if you're new to ChatGPT, is go on there. There's a free plan, doesn't cost you anything. Go into the free plan and start playing around with it. Start using the prompt maker. Take one task that you want to do, develop a social media content calendar. You can upload documents, and so you could have it, review HR policies. You could have it review a letter that you're writing to somebody, a supplier to change terms or to, anything at all, right? Any kind of document. You can upload a document and you can have it review that document and say, help me improve the tone of voice in this document. Help me make this much more concise. But you want to give it the context, right? And the context is what you can do using this prompt maker. So before you do that, you would say, please optimize this prompt. I'm going to upload our HR policies, and I need you to make it much more concise and update it according to, the new laws in place and blah, 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 right? And then this prompt maker will spit out a much better prompt for you. And then you can go back and you can start a conversation. You can upload the file and you can say, here's our HR policies, right? I need it to be more concise. I need it to be more relevant to, the climate in today's world with, this issue and this issue, that kind of a thing, right? This is also, if you do these kind of things, and this is where it's important to go in here and turn these controls off, right? Because if you're sharing that kind of information, you want it to be private, right? You don't necessarily want the whole world to have access to your information. And so again, as I've been told by people who know, so I trust them, but you decide your own levels of trust. But if I do this, it turns that off. So that information is not public. If you use a program called Claude, is another version of ChatGPT kind of thing. That was started by former employees of OpenAI who made ChatGPT. They left and they started their own company, Anthropic, and they're building Claude as their version of a chatbot, specifically because they had some issues early on with the safety of ChatGPT. Essentially, is I'm making it very simple why they did this, but with that chatbot with Claude, there's a lot greater sense of privacy with it, because that was a main point of why those people built that product and how they build it, right? So I think ChatGPT is trying to keep up with it by giving you those options, okay? But this is the basics, right? So just like with any of these other, the Magical or the AI Calendar or whatever, the Reclaim, like try it out. Go in here, sign up, get a free account, start playing around with it. Just figure out what are a couple tasks that are most difficult for you, or a couple tasks that take the longest time. You're proofreading certain documents. Let it proofread for you and see what it does. Give it bad prompts, right? Just type in what you think you should type in, and you'll see it kind of gives you garbage. But then if you go into this prompt maker and use that, you're going to end up getting much better output, right? And then if and when you get a chance and you think like, okay, this is kind of cool, pay the $20 1 month, right? It's a month by month thing. So pay the $20 1 month, get access to Canvas and some of the other bells and whistles, and then you can start using that. And I think you'll see it's well worth $20 a month if you're going to use it regularly, right? This one, I use it for almost everything, right? Communications I have, reviewing documents, designing lesson plans, and when I teach, or memos for the business, or any of that kind of stuff, I use it. And because of the way that Canvas now works, like I said, I can have conversations specifically targeted at the place where I want to have the conversation with it. Because at the end of the day, all I'm really doing with this thing is having a conversation, right? It's just me. It's like I'm having a conversation with a person. And if I approach it that way, as we're just having a conversation, I'm going to get a lot better information out of it than if I approach it as if I'm like asking Google something. Okay, so just a little brain hack. But I can have a much more targeted conversation now with these new releases that they're putting out. And so it just, again, helps me be significantly more efficient, because now I don't have to go back and try to piece things together and put, this, by the time I've gone through 3, 4, 5 different questions and answers, I got to put that information back with the original information. I don't have to do that anymore. It's all captured in one, right? So that would be kind of my advice with this. Similar to any of these other, the Geminis, the Copilots, whatever, they're going to have a free version. They're going to have a paid version. The free version is going to give you capability. The paid version is going to give you some bells and whistles, usually that I think are more valuable. But I always recommend people Start with the free version, play around with it, pick 2, 3 tasks that you don't enjoy, that take you a really long time, that you just struggle with, and try to have this thing help you with that task and see how it goes, right? The other cool thing is you can just ask it how to have it help you, right? So you can ask it, I need to review and update my company's HR policies. I know that you, ChatGPT, can help me with that, but I'm not sure how. What are 3 or 4 ways I can ask you to help me do this that would be the most effective to making sure I have updated and relevant HR policies? And so it tells me how to use it to do what I want to do, right? So again, I tell people all the time, like, there is no learning curve to this because it will tell me how to use it, right? So the only learning curve there are to these chatbot tools are how good are you at having a conversation with a person? That's the only skill that this takes, right, to get going, because that's essentially what you're doing. And so if you can have a conversation with a person and you can ask questions in such a way that get you the information you need from other people, that's the skill you need to use these things. So there really isn't a learning curve at all because it tells you how to use it to do what you want it to do. And so that's why I think these are just unbelievable, right? I think it's something that's so unusual that we haven't really seen before. Super exciting for me as a business owner, super exciting for me as a leader, a team leader, that has some staff working for me, and super exciting for me as an educator and working with young people, because it really just does change the game. And it can be super, super overwhelming because there's so many things out there and because it does so many things. But the best way to go about it is to say, I'm going to make that list, right, of high value and low value tasks. I'm going to pick one. I'm going to start with one. I'm going to find a tool that does that. I'm going to use it for 10, 15, 20, whatever minutes a day, practice, because this is a skill. I'm going to get good at it and turn on ChatGPT and, do some things that might help you at work. Do some things that are fun, right? Just have conversations with it and you'll start to learn how to use these tools so that you can become much more efficient in what you do at work, or if you got a side hustle or whatever part of life you want to use these things for, they can be really helpful. Don't use them in your marriage. I have found they're not very helpful there, but any other aspect of life, I have found them to be really, really useful. It takes some practice because it's a skill, but the investment of learning these skills, I think, has a tremendous payoff. For you, for your coworkers, for your employees, whatever the situation may be. You don't need to have people spend as much time on the things that they used to spend time on that aren't as valuable for your role in your business. You can have them now spending a lot more time on the things that are valuable, right? It takes a little time to learn for people to get practiced in these things. But again, that investment, I think, pays off in spades. So quickly. And then you have people on your team, people in your business who are knowledgeable about these things. They can very quickly train other people. And then you've got a couple sort of internal champions who, when new things come out or when you're looking for, I really need help with doing this thing, you've kind of now got some internal people to go to say, hey, I know you're really good at this stuff. How might I do this, right? So it just kind of helps everybody become much more efficient and effective. So that's a little bit of a fire hose. I didn't want to do too much. I didn't want to overwhelm, but I wanted to at least give you something to start with that, hopefully you can play around with it and have a little fun. It's super fun, right? Especially with ChatGPT, you can have some fun, engaging conversations with it and do some kind of fun, interesting things with it. So it doesn't all have to be serious work stuff. But when you're doing it, again, you're learning how to use it. So just practice the skill. It's really going to pay off for you, and it's going to pay big dividends for you and your role, and make you more valuable in your role. And if you're a business owner and you're in that role, it's going to make those people working in your business and on your business much more effective. So just it's worth the investment.
Thank you so much. So, as a
Yeah.
reminder, please feel free to ask questions. I do have a question, actually. So,
Mhm.
we were talking about privacy in ChatGPT,
Yeah.
but I think is it Firefly, the one who does the meeting notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any privacy issues with Firefly or any kind of program like that taking notes during your meeting?
Yes. So I'll always couch things by saying I'm not a tech person, so I don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing. I don't know what's happening behind, the black box, right? But so I don't believe so, right? And I use Fireflies again. I've had recommendations from other colleagues that use these things a lot more. And I think like for those kind of tools and some of the market leading tools, obviously privacy is a big concern, and so they are going to build in the controls to make sure that the meetings that we have and we record are not just being shared with everything and everybody. So I don't have any concerns with that particular program because I did enough research where I felt comfortable with it. But I think part of where people get into problems with a lot of these tools is there's kind of the newest sexiest thing, right? This new one comes out, and there's people who are early adopters who want to jump on the new thing, and that's fine. But I think part of the way I look at it is I'd rather wait a little bit, let it get vetted, let people see like what are the problems with
Mhm.
this, and then I'll jump in, right? So I would say when new things first come out, those kind of things might be an issue, and you got to be really aware of those. But I think as time goes and they build and they get investments and they get the use cases and the clientele, some of these companies are not going to, Salesforce, right, is not going to use Fireflies as a tool if they have
Mhm.
concerns over the privacy issue. Um, so some of it is just that kind of market signals you have to pay attention to as well.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question. If that someone shared, if I'm looking to hire some employees, can you use AI to hire employees, and what kind of tools or tips do you have for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell students on the flip side of it, I tell students, when you're looking for jobs and you're positioning yourself for jobs, you're an idiot if you don't use something like a ChatGPT or something, right? On the flip side, from the business perspective, same thing. So, for instance, what you can do is you can, take here's a job description, here's a resume. If it were me, I would take the name and contact, any personal information off the resume, but I would be able to load that into ChatGPT and I would say, here's the job description, here are the responsibilities, whatever context it needs to understand the type of person you're looking for, right? And even in there, you could throw things in there about the type of culture and blah blah blah, right? And then you can say, here's a resume. Um, how does this person seem to fit with the job and the responsibilities and whatever? Where might there be some gaps? And then you could even further go in and say, here's the job description, here's the culture of the organization, here's training manuals we have, so it can learn a lot about the company, and then you can have it say, you know, develop 5 or 6 questions for an interview, these kind of questions, or I'm really looking to um, better understand somebody's character or sense of integrity or whatever, right? Or I want to really know more about do these people have this skill. It can start to give you ideas on how might you be able to ask certain questions or certain tasks you might be able to do in an interview that would get at that skill a little more. So it's not perfect. Again, I would say review whatever it's giving you, but it's going to do that significantly quicker than you can do it. It's going to come up with things that we've never thought of, right? And they may be complete nonsense, but some of them are going to be really kind of good nuggets. And if nothing else, it at least helps my brain to start working in
Hmm.
different ways. So,
Yeah.
so anything like that, that's a wonderful example, Pam. But anything like that, you think about, here's the way I used to do it, right? I had this job description, I have these resumes, I go through and
Hmm.
whatever process you've used in the past, like these tools can help significantly speed up that process with a lot more depth than what you could ever have done in a lot quicker time.
Well, that's good because I mean, you can do the same thing with evaluations then if you have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
deal with
100%.
evaluations. So that's a great point.
Yeah,
Another,
and it's just making sure, I'm sorry, real quick, it's
no,
just,
no.
it's always making sure the more context you can give these things, the better it is, right? And so I mean, and it can take an unbelievable amount of information, right? When you're like uploading files and stuff like that. So if you're ever doing these things, the more information you can give it, the more context you can give it around what you're asking for, the better the output's going to be, and the better efficiency and effectiveness you're going to find.
Yeah. So we have a lot of businesses who's one of the biggest things that they tell us is they struggle with marketing. And so we had a question about, and I know you showed your example about a marketing plan, but what about video use in with AI, utilizing AI for videos?
Yeah, so I don't do a ton of stuff in this area, right? So I can't speak from a ton of expertise in this area. But I think, and so I have no doubt there are a lot of tools out there that will like make awesome viral videos for you. I don't know, right? So just to be transparent, but part of what I know you can do is create the context for the video, the script for the video, that kind of like pre-work. Um, for instance, you can use ChatGPT to do a lot of that pre-work, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
right? And again, it's not necessarily going to give you anything perfect, but even for I don't have a marketing brain, right? And so that's just
Yeah.
not who I am, and that's not a skill I have. So if I'm trying to do that, I can rely on somebody else on my team, and I could take a lot of their time to go, hey, start from scratch and come up with this. Or I can say, hey, I'm going to use ChatGPT to get the first draft of something, then we're going to respond to it, right? And so I'm seeing much further and more creative progress if I do it that way. Give me a draft, let me respond to it, right? And then I'm sure there are things where I could say, okay, here's a tool that I can plug a script in and I can describe whatever scenery I want or whatever, that kind of thing. I don't know a lot about video, so I can't comment on that directly. But I have no doubt there's a lot of tools out there that can help with that, right?
Yeah. No, that's
But like I
great.
said, even the steps, right? So whatever the task is, if you kind of break it down into the steps to complete the task, there are a lot of steps in that process where something like a ChatGPT can really be helpful to speed it up, but to make it more effective as well.
Yeah, and as someone in marketing, we do use ChatGPT for that reason,
Hmm.
and we do create. There are a lot of tools that can create images. Just sometimes they might have 8 fingers, so you just have to be. It's a learning process, so you just, like you said, review everything.
Yeah,
Um,
and you'll find too, for some, I mean, it's not easy to make video, right? It's a very
yeah,
complicated thing to do this. And so when you have things that are complicated, I think what a lot of people find is people who are doing it really well, they sort of hack together, I use this one to get the image, I use this one for the soundtrack, I use this one for the, right? And so it becomes even more complicated,
yeah,
um, which is why I think if you kind of do little steps at a time, right? And you just kind of practice and eventually you get there because there are people making amazing videos. There's probably even people making like full-blown movies nowadays with these tools, so it's totally possible. It just takes time to learn and practice it so that you don't get 8 fingers or completely misspelled words, right? They're also not that great with words.
no. I think our last question is about AI for like certain business tools like payroll. Are there, how can people use AI for, I guess, some of those other tasks like payroll?
Yeah, I don't know a ton. Thankfully, we have the business I'm involved with is very successful, but there's three of us and we're kind of hacking it together. So we haven't run into a lot of those kind of things. But so similarly, I can't necessarily um, recommend very specific tools, but I think part of what I find a lot of business owners do and what they do is LinkedIn is where I find most of my information and I learn most about what people are doing, right? It can be a little overwhelming because everybody wants to talk about this now. But if I go on there and I have people, I built relationships with them, or they're a trustworthy source. I look at them as somebody that's trustworthy. They're all going to be posting about stuff, right? And so I can go on there and I can learn, oh, these business colleagues I have, like they're talking about this tool, right? Or just reaching out to people and saying, hey, what are you using for payroll, right? What could I do? You might ask ChatGPT, I want to find some AI tools for this task. Like, what do you recommend? There's a little bit of a lag time in terms of the cutoff date for information it's trained on.
Hmm.
So you have to kind of understand that. But all of those ways are at least here's where you can start to get information about what tools might there be that are useful, right? Um, I would say if people are not familiar with AI stuff in general,
Hmm.
uh, my recommendation is start with less dangerous tasks. Right?
Yes.
Um, marketing super important, payroll super important, right? Like these are critical functions of the company. And yes, it would be wonderful to be able to offload a lot of that onto
Hmm.
tools, right? However, uh, you don't want to go wrong with that kind of stuff, right? So again, if you kind of start with some very simple, low value tasks,
Hmm.
when the time comes for you to transition and you start using these things for much more high value tasks, you're going to be much more comfortable in how do you use these things.
Yeah.
So it's always just start simple, right? I mean, this is not rocket science, and the way of using this, it's the same as the internet. It's the same when Excel came out. It's the same when calculators came out. Like you just have to practice. You just have to try some things out and practice it. It's just the newest iteration of kind of new tools to help us be better at what we do.
Yeah. Because AI has been out for a long time. Really, it's
Yeah,
just
I
how
argue
it's
with people all the time, and they're like, "This stuff's horrible. I'm never going to use it." Right? And I go, "Really? So do you use Google Maps?
and
When's the last time you
Siri.
DoorDashed? When's it? Yeah, right. Like, do you use Siri? Do you have Alexa in your home? So it's just like it's all out there, right? We're using it, and it's just going to become more and more a part of our lives. And as a business, right, the more I can offload some of those tasks onto these things, not to replace people, but to help people be more efficient. It just benefits everybody, right? The employees enjoy work more because they're spending time doing the things they enjoy doing that they see as high value. So they're more satisfied, they're enjoying work more, right? It keeps rolling on the benefits of this, but it takes time, and it can be pretty messy. And so just get started and start with very small, very low value, small tasks, and that's how you do it.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Absolutely.
the realistic approach, and I think that's super important for people who are even just getting started. So, um, thank you very much for coming on today. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the Better Business Bureau. We can get you connected with Doan if
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm happy. Sorry to interrupt you, but please, share my information. I'm happy to hop on a call with people just to brainstorm of what do you think about this, or what can I do with this, or how do I do this, or come talk to your teams about certain things. I'm happy to be a resource. I've been playing around with this a long time. I love it. I geek out on it all the time, and I just see so much benefit from it. And so, please, consider me a resource if I can be. And I'm the first one to say no if something isn't in my wheelhouse or I don't have time. So as I tell my students, ask and let me say no.
well, thank you so much, and we appreciate your time today. And hopefully,
Absolutely.
we'll have you on for another AI webinar in the future.
Happy to be a resource
All
anytime,
right.
Pam. Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.